You're right guys, as you can see I've got something a little different in the workshop at the minute. This is the Pantorouter. Now in my recent video announcing that I'd be at Makers Central at the NEC on the 11th and 12th of May, that's in Birmingham, Peter Sefton from Woodworkers Workshop asked if I'd mind popping over to their booth to do a couple of demos for them. Of course I said yes, but I've never used the Pantorouter before, so they very kindly sent it over just for me to have a practice with it and get a feel for it, and then I'll be bringing it along to the NEC to show some demos there. Now my idea was to do a project, and my thinking was being that I'd probably spending an hour to 2 hours at the booth, because obviously the majority of my time I want to spend talking to you guys. I don't want to be stuck on one booth the whole time, but that means I need a project that can be done in that time frame. Of course a lot of the prep work and sizing can be done here before the show, but obviously this Pantorouter mainly shows off the joinery side of things, so I've been trying to come up with something that incorporates a lot of joinery yet still be simple and quick to do. My first thought was a modern industrial style kind of lamp. Thinking lamp because it's got a purpose and it would look good on the stand kind of thing, but it could be anything. And if you guys have got any ideas, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a comment down below. It doesn't have to be a lamp, just something quick and simple that could show off mortise and tenon joinery, box joints, dovetails, that kind of thing. But anyway, in this video it's basically going to be me trying it for the very first time. Luckily, because this is their demo unit, it was already put together. This is what they use to do demos at the different shows around the UK, so I didn't have to put anything together on it. I've got the dust hood that needs to get put on, but you know what my dust extraction's like in here, so for this video I'm going to leave it off for the time being and just hoover up as I go, but at least you'll be able to see what the bit does. I have got it all checked to make sure that it's centred, and I've put on the 1-inch tenon template. Now this will cut the mortise and the tenon. I need to put the right bit in, I need to get the wood marked up, because as far as I can tell it all works off centres. So there's a centre line on the table, there's a centre line on the template frame at the back. So I've got the instructions, I've read them through, but I think it's one of those where you've got to get hands on with it, and that's the best way to learn it. These are what I'm going to be doing the test cuts on. This is just some basic CLS. These are offcuts I've got from some random project. It was probably from making this fold down table, to be honest with you, but it'll do the job to learn. Now I need to go ahead and mark the centres of them, but before I do that I need to set the height of the Pantorouter template holder so it is centred on the wood. Now in order to find the centre of the CLS, it's actually simpler than you think. There's two stops in place. Now you measure the in-between to fit the material, and that determines where the centre of the bit will fall. So basically it's a case of undoing these side sections so this can raise up and down. Then all you want to do is you want to get the material you're going to be cutting the joinery in and offer it up so you get the actual measurement, the thickness of the material, and lock it in place. That side's locked. Should be the same this side because it's all nice and square, but just to make sure. So with that locked in place, the centre on the template should be the centre of the wood, and we can test that with the scribe bit that's in the router at the moment. This is the scribing bit that's installed at the moment. Now of course we don't want to turn the router on with this in. This is literally just to make sure that it's all centred up correctly. But up top we've got the template for the tenon, and we've also got this guide bearing. Now we want the bearing to run inside this groove, so of course I need that to go in facing the template. So I'll slide this through, let's still leave it loose, and then you can make sure that it engages in there. So now it only follows, and it can't come out of that slot now, so it'll only go back and forth. Now to make sure it's centred, I can offer the block of wood up to the bit, just hold it flat to the table, of course, make sure it's flat, and then it's just a case of moving it back and forth to scribe me a line. I'm going to put a pencil mark in it just so it shows up better left-handed. So there's the mark that it's left, so when I flip this over it should match up. It's looking pretty good, and let's see how close it is. It's a little bit lower, so I need some adjustment. Now in the instructions it says about moving those little stops at the bottom to adjust if it's not centred, but because I don't really know that much about it at the minute, I'm just going to opt to shim the wood with a couple of pieces of tape, and hopefully that added thickness should bring it centred. we shall see. It might need a bit more, it might need a bit less. I'm kind of just seeing how it works as I go along. So I've got a couple of pieces of tape on there now that hopefully makes a bit of a difference, we'll see. That looks spot on to me. Now the same way as if you was doing it by hand, you want to cut the mortise before the tenon. So I'm going to just pick a random spot on this because of course it's just scrap. This is just for me to have a practice, and I'm just going to mark a line to give me a point of reference to work from. Now this line is going to be matched up with the centre line that's on the table to make it easier to sit flush against the edge and like not tip too far over or too far back, so it's nice and flush. There's these stops that you can add on to the front. Of course these slide into place into any position. For now I'm just going to butt the wood up, hold it nice and tight and clamp that in place. Clamp the other one in place as well, making sure that it's away from where I'm actually want to be cutting against the centre line. As you can see there's plenty of room either side, and these will just act as a stop to butt up against the edge. Now we want to line up the centre line and get it clamped in place. To clamp it in place like this I'll be using the Bessie Clamps. Now these slide into the T-tracks on the table and they're incredibly strong, they've got a lot of hold down power. So I'll slide this one in place first, get the centre line aligned with the centre line on the table, making sure it's butted up against this edge, and then I can clamp this in place and hold it nice and secure. Of course I'll put the other one in on the other end as well. Remove this fence, it'll give me more room. That's not going anywhere. Now I need to put an actual router bit in before I cut anything, don't I? Now because we've got the 10mm guide bearing on to guide along the template, I'm going to need to use a 10mm bit. Now this is a spiral upcut bit, so all the chips will be removed upwards from the bit and of course empty out from the mortise that we're cutting. If it was a cut down bit, all the bits will get clogged in. It's just better to use these. All the chips will get cleared by themselves. And of course if the dust hood was in place they'd get hoovered up, but I'll leave it off for now and I'll hoover up later. Now because this is just a test and it's just scrap and I just want to have a practice, I'm not going to do the mortise very deep, I'm just going to go about 12mm. So I've gone ahead and marked a rough line that's 12mm deep on this piece of wood, so I can set the depth of the router and set the stops at the bottom as well, so it won't go any deeper than that. Now that I've got the right bit installed, the workpiece centred and locked in place, my depth stop's sorted, it's just a case of placing the bearing in the mortise slot on the template now and cutting. Wish me luck. So let's have a look how we actually did. Look how clean that is. Obviously the sharp bits have a lot to do with it, but it looks nice and precise. Now we need to cut the tenon. To mark up the tenon, I've gone ahead and marked the centre line on the end of the end grain. Obviously that's where we're going to be cutting the tenon on this. But I also need to mark the depth. We've got the 12mm, I've got that locked in on my marking gauge, so I can strike a line and then we can set the bit up to that line. To get the piece centred this time, obviously we need this end line that I've got on the end grain centred to match up with the centre line on the table itself. And I'm going to use this fence to get it lined up. We don't want these stops in place, we don't want it to be flush because the router bit has got to remove material all the way around, not just in the middle. So we want it hanging over the edge. Doesn't have to be too much over the edge, just as long as it's further than where it's actually going to be cutting. So I've got this in place, it's all matching up nice and centred on there. Now that shouldn't move anywhere. Now we need to make sure the bit and the stop is adjusted so it matches that line. previously we had the bearing riding on the inside to cut the mortise. This time I'm cutting the tenon, so we need it to ride on the outside. Now you might notice that these templates are slightly tapered, wider at the back and narrower at the front. So to start, I'm going to have the bearing roughly at the back, so it'll cut a larger tenon. Because of course we can always make the tenon smaller, but we can't make it bigger. So I'm going to start with the cut running around there, test the fit. If it's too tight, I can move the bearing in slightly to make it slightly smaller. Right, let's see how we did. Let's try the fit. Again, it's a really nice clean cut, but let's see how it actually fits into the mortise. There is a bit of play, but it feels nice and flush. Now obviously I've cut that too small, so it's no good tapering it down because it'll just cut it even smaller. So I need to have the bearing further back to cut it slightly bigger so it's a tighter fit. But still, for a first try, I think that's turned out really well. I'm going to flip it over and see if I can get a tighter fit using the other side. So for this second cut now, I've put the bearing right at the very back. So it should cut it that little bit wider, which should give a tighter fit. But let's see. You can see how much tighter that is compared to that first one. So just by moving it that little tiny bit, it's made it that much tighter. So I'm going to put it back in place and see if we can get the fit closer. So now, because I've got it so far back, I want to kind of get a happy medium to where it was before. So I'm going to try it there. And let's see how that goes. Of course, once this is set and it's all right, you don't have to change it again. As you know, it didn't fit, it was too big the first time, so I've trimmed it up again, and now that might still be a little bit tight, but it goes together nice and smooth, nice and strong, and of course when there's glue in that, that's going to be an incredibly strong joint. You might be interested to see, this is the amount of chips that it's actually kicked out from cutting those joints. It's cut one mortise and two tenons, as you saw, and this is kind of what it's left, and there is some on the floor as well. So when I do attach the dust hood, hopefully we'll be able to see a big difference into what the mess is like. So that's it for this video then, really guys, because all I really wanted to do was just try it out and see if I can get this first joint to work, and I'm really impressed with it. I think it's worked really well. As you can imagine, once you've got it set up, if you've got plenty of these to do, it's just a rinse and repeat job now. It's all tuned in, it's all set up, so you just whack these in place and away you go. Now just to make it clear, this isn't sponsored in any way. This machine isn't mine to keep. I haven't been paid for this video. I'm not being paid to be on the booth. Just complete transparency. But I hope that you can help me out and come up with an idea of a project to do for the demo at Makers Central. Like I say, it doesn't have to be a lamp. That was just something that I was thinking off the top of my head. But hopefully, seeing it in action, seeing what it can do, maybe it's gives you some ideas. And I really look forward to hearing what you've got in mind down in the comments below. Please share this around with your friends as well. If they've got some ideas, I really need to hear them. So thank you all for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next video, where I'll hopefully be developing the final idea of what's going to be demoed. So look out for that one, and hopefully I'll see you all at Makers Central, where you can see me do the demo, and hopefully I don't fail too bad. See you there.